So today we're going to talk about Tourette syndrome. And most people don't even know what that is. And it's a neurological disorder that often is compulsive and repetitive, what we call tics, right? Which could be a head move, a nod. I think in the past, people think of it as people as cursing, which is such a rare presentation of Tourette syndrome. So it's really more about the tics, right? But it also often comes with a diagnosis of some other things like ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, anxiety, depression. There's other things that come with it, which is, something we'll get into. But I think for me, what I wanted to kind of start with is like, when did you first experience what you now know as being Tourette's? Like, when did you first experience that?
So everything in hindsight is 2020.
Absolutely.
But so growing up, at some point, kind of during a time of high stress in the family dynamics,
Yeah.
I started some little motor tics, like with my head, or always wanting to like crack my neck, or little things like that. And I always had really bad allergies, so I sniffed a lot, and so it became more. I'd sniff all the time,
Yeah.
as opposed to, and so nobody thought it was anything other
Sure.
than like hey, will you stop that?
Right.
Why are you doing that? And so, and then for a period of time as an adult, they all went away for a long time.
Okay.
Like just they were non-existent, and I was actually in a for a period of time in that time frame in a broadcast career where having a tic like would not have been conducive to what I did.
Right.
And so I mean, it was just non-existent.
Okay.
And about 12 years ago now, I was in my late 40s, it like showed back up. And it showed back up mainly in a throat clearing type of thing.
Okay.
And so anyway, so it really got to where I just couldn't control this thing, so I went and saw a doctor who kind of specialized in tics, and he's the one who basically said, okay, Tourette's. Most people think of it as what you see in like the
Right.
South Park episode,
Right.
or like the girl who's on one of the streaming channels now who's got her little thing.
Okay.
Those are the real extreme cases,
Okay.
but basically a Tourette's diagnosis can be, if you have been, I think, diagnosed with one motor and one verbal,
Right.
or two motor tics inside your lifetime, you technically can be classified
Right.
as having Tourette. So
Right.
so it's a broad spectrum. So I think I'm like on the lower end. I don't have the South Park like outburst.
Yeah.
That if people don't know what I'm talking about, just go Google the South Park Tourette's
Right.
episode, and you can find it and watch it.
Right.
And it's very irreverent, but it's very funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about
Yeah.
what Tourette's is or isn't,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and people don't really understand neurodiversity as a whole, and Tourette's is something that falls under neurodiversity because it's a neurological difference, right? Did you notice the tics, or did other people notice the tics? Like, how aware were you?
I mean, for the most part, aware, because there's a lot of trying to control it and make sure people didn't see it. You burn up a lot of mental energy.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it under control, wondering if somebody heard it. Sometimes I think I could get where I just didn't realize how bad it was.
Yeah.
Or I wish it would just stop.
Yeah.
I wish it would stop. And so it can be very exhausting.
Yeah.
But other people would notice, and a lot of people show you a lot of grace or whatever. I've seen people before like make fun of me behind my back. They didn't know that I hurt them.
That's hurtful.
It is, and you run into some lack of understanding occasionally, where people are like, what's wrong with you? And or they're just getting annoyed by you and just think that, like, why, they're not even, they don't realize they're dealing with something that's a neurological thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's very true. People just don't know what they don't know, right? So, when you were diagnosed with Tourette's, Was this a relief? Was it something that upset you? Like, how did you respond to getting that diagnosis?
I mean, I think there was a little bit of of shame around it because it does have a stigma associated
Sure.
with it. You know, and so. So I told some people about it, people close to me or whatever, but I didn't share it widely.
Yeah.
And I actually shared it with I actually shared it with my ex-wife, and she like laughed.
Did she?
And she like, and then I got kind of offended, and she like apologized very quickly. She was kind of like, she goes, "I'm sorry, that just kind of came out."
Yeah.
You know, like.
Like laughing at you, or just laughing because you thought it was silly? Like, what was the laugh
think
about?
I don't know. I don't know that it was. I think maybe she had in her mind that it's this thing, and it was, you know, and it just. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't find it funny.
No, I'm sure you didn't.
Yeah.
That's it. But people have really odd reactions sometimes when they don't know what to say,
Yeah.
and they don't know what to think about something, and they don't really know about something.
Yeah, and I
Right.
probably should clarify that my ex-wife and I have a very, very
Right.
good relationship. So it wasn't like she was doing it to be
Right.
we-
No,
you know.
no. She didn't want to hurt you. She just maybe
Right.
didn't react real appropriately in that moment. So when did you start to understand, or did you understand that this was part of neurodiversity?
Probably not for a while. I mean, clearly it was something neurological
Sure.
in nature, and you know the way it gets described is, you know, you just get this nervous system urge that just like it's just a buildup of energy, and it's just like, oh, if it would just release.
Right.
And like writing it out is difficult.
Yeah.
And so it's just you know, so I knew it was something neurological.
Right.
And you know, and then you know the kind of the ways to treat it are through like you know, it takes a lot of work to treat it. You know, you got to look for what they call like competing reactions or whatever, to do something else when you feel that urge. It's not as noticeable, and it's like it. And like I said, it just becomes, you know,
Exhausting.
It makes you realize how turned on your nervous system is all day long.
Right.
When you have to pay attention to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I think we see the comorbidity with anxiety and depression.
Right.
Right. Because people don't realize how exhausting it is to be so aware of what your system's doing involuntarily.
Right.
Right. And so we all have things. Yours are just more prominent and make you self-conscious and can be disruptive. In what ways has this been disruptive to your life?
One thing. I mean, before I answer that, I want to go back to one thing that does come into play here.
Okay.
There was a long period of time as an adult where my tics kind of went away,
Yeah.
and in that time, I did over the period of time develop a substance abuse issue.
Okay.
And it wasn't present during the time where I drank and things like that. I've been sober now for almost 20 years, and it showed back up when I was sober. No, I was not on any sort of medication or anything like that of any sort. So I just want to throw that little thing in there. So the question.
Wait a minute. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
I just want to stick with this for a second because we have talked about this, and this is the way in which it dulled your senses and dulled your nervous system, right? So it may have actually helped in that way because it lowered your anxiety, it lowered the compulsions and all of that. However, it is not a very healthy way, right, to manage symptomology.
No,
right?
no, I wouldn't have survived that way much longer.
No, right. So yes, you're trading one thing for another, but so that leads me, so we'll get back to the other question, but that leads me to think about, is there other medications they've recommended for you to take, and how has that worked?
So there's not really medications
Right.
for it. I mean, the things that they will say, like in severe cases, you can do like, what is it, like Haldol, which is what they use to treat schizophrenia, I believe. I'm not trying to poke fun at
No, in
any
bipolar disorder, no, it's very significant. It's a significant drug.
Yeah, like it's,
Yeah.
it's like there's nothing on the low end to help it, and if they give you something like, they can give you something that'll stop the tics, but you're basically going to have so many side effects from it that you're going to be non-functional in other ways. So there really never was like a pharmaceutical way to even slightly manage it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anxiety and depression often show up in with this, and I think often because you're spending so much time being so self-aware and self-conscious, right? Did this affect your confidence? Did you see depression and anxiety as part of this dynamic?
So there's certainly it did like bother me in terms of like social settings and things like that, and I could get anxious over them. You know, there can be like shame around it,
Yeah.
like what are people thinking about me? And there could be times where like it seemed like it was actually pretty good today, and someone was like, your ticks really seem to be kind of bad today, and I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm not even self aware. I mean, you can just get into this kind of emotional cycle around it that
Yeah.
it's. I've said it multiple times. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It is.
Right. And I think that's the part that people just don't realize. Like, they just see you occasionally sniffling or clearing your throat.
Right.
But for you, the awareness of this can really override you being present in the moment. It can interfere with relationships. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah. I was on a date one time, and I think this woman ended up having like what's the thing where you can't handle sounds, like misophonia or something?
It's the eating sounds. It's like mouth sounds.
Yeah,
eating sounds. Yes, it does start with an M, and I don't know.
Anyway, she was like, "Yeah, I just don't think this is going to be like a good. We're just going to clash on that." And so anyway, but I remember one time I was in like a store, like Target or something, and around the edge of the aisle, one of my daughters popped her head around and went, "I knew that was you over here." We didn't go to the store together. She
has found you.
she heard me like clear my throat or something, and that's my dad.
Yeah.
And so I mean
But it hasn't been life altering.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. I'm sure I drive like my other half or my best friend, crazy sometimes with it, but most of the time people have been really graceful about it.
Are you able to talk about it? Like, so if someone's having a day where they are being a little more sensitive than usual, and maybe you're having a day where your tics are more than usual, are you able to talk about that? Is that something, or do you feel if someone mentions it, you feel self-conscious, which is understandable?
I can now.
Okay.
That's only recent.
Yeah.
And I've been in a relationship for a good while now, and it's something that she and I struggled with, like finding language around it, because I would get like really defensive.
Yeah.
And about it, she would say things like, this does not change how I feel about you.
Right.
This is not a deal breaker, but I need to be able to talk to you.
Yeah.
And so we eventually, after a lot of trial and error, came up with some language around it that allows us to talk about it.
Yeah.
And with my best friend, I can be a little more, blunt.
Yeah.
I don't have to,
Yeah.
It's just different.
Yeah,
Guys.
it is. It is. Well, there is a totally different connotation about that.
Yeah.
So, do you find that when you're stressed or you have fatigue or things like that, does that impact the tics?
It does. I mean, if I'm, in sobriety, there's a term they call HALT, which is hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Okay.
And
right.
like any of those things can just kind of induce anxiety.
For sure.
And it can tend to be worse then, especially tired. Like if I haven't, I kind of, that amount of energy that it takes to kind of manage it.
Yeah.
Like, going back to that energy thing, it's almost like you could tell somebody, okay, try not to blink for 1 minute. Because you've got to like stop a reaction to blink for a minute. And you could do it for a minute. You might be able to do it for 2 or 3.
I'm trying to do it right now.
Yeah. Try to do it.
It's hard even now because now I'm thinking about it, so now I want to do it.
Try only to blink like once every 5 minutes all day long. And you would be exhausted by like noon.
Yeah, right. That's a great analogy. That's right. Because as soon as you said it, now I want to blink. So now I'm super aware, right, of wanting to do it.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, but I can't. And then it happens anyway. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So then do you beat yourself up like when you're trying not to do it and it happens anyway and you can't control it? Then are you beating yourself up?
I don't think it's so much that. I think it's really, for me, got to the state was my biggest problem now is when I don't realize that it's like been as obvious as it has been. And where I'm kind of like, okay, this has actually been a like pretty good day or morning or whatever.
Right.
And then someone will let me know that it wasn't. Now, because also has could do with their sensitivity to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You.
So if I could, when you come in and we talk about stuff, like if you have a particularly stressful topic that you're going to talk about, because I'm always observing, right? Where are your tics today? What does that look like? And I may see that you're having more tics, but as we talk, they'll calm down. Like the anxiety of whatever's weighing on you that we're going to talk about that day, you may have more tics when you first come in. But then by the time that we finish talking about something and your nervous system has calmed down and we've co-regulated, then your tics seem to lessen during that time.
And there's another thing too that I kind of left out, like what tends to impact it.
Yeah.
Like anytime I was getting ready to get on the phone with somebody, they amped up, and I have like no idea where that came from because I grew up in the generation talking on the phone.
Right.
We didn't text, we talked
right.
on the phone. But I found phone conversations were places where it was very difficult for me sometimes. Okay. And I'm sure that being on the other end of a speaker or on a phone with someone, it's got to be like way more annoying than in person.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of that, but I mean, perhaps.
Yeah, but
right?
What is sensitive now is all these, phones are to sound and everything.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I'll hear the background noise more than I hear the person, right? Like they're like, your birds are so loud, right? And I'm like, it's so strange. I'm not picking up your voice all the time, but. So, do you have any diagnosed co-occurring things like ADHD or OCD or autism, anything like that?
I've never had anything like officially diagnosed. Do I have a few little OCD tendencies? Yeah. Do I have a little ADHD? Probably. Yeah. I've taken some of like the free tests that are out there. That'll be like, okay, you're somewhere on the spectrum. And I think as I get to learn more about neurodivergency and there's not so much stigma attached to it, I can see other things that are like, this is a neurodivergent thing.
Yeah. Does that help you just better understand yourself, or does it add some level of stress or anxiety to that?
I think it helps me better understand myself, and of course, I'm in a relationship with someone who is very, very ADHD.
Yeah.
And learning about it and understanding like why they're processing or doing these things has been very helpful. To just understand that it's not personal. It's the way their brain functions. So I know I have a little bit of that, a little bit of the OCD. Yeah. But like I said, nothing specifically diagnosed. But I think the good thing about it is this is like back when I got sober. It was like when I realized that okay, there really is like something wrong here. There's like it's not me. It's not like part of It's like
it's not your personality. It's not some deficit in you.
Yeah. And there's a solution here, and the solution may be that it's that it just becomes more manageable and over time.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that comes with understanding, right? Age, awareness. I think that you have spent a lot of time trying to get help. You've tried several different things, right, to try to get help and to manage some of this. And what have you found to be useful? What was the most useful thing that you tried over there? Because you did try things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think, a couple of things. Let me think through this one. There were some things that I tried that really didn't work. Like I tried a ketamine therapy, and it helped with some other things, but it didn't really help with that. Some of the things that I was given by the first person who diagnosed me, which are just cognitive behavioral things, have been helpful. But again, it's kind of the commitment to doing them. They're only as successful as I'm willing to do it.
Right.
You know, and I think probably just more general, since I've been seeing you, a general understanding of just neurodiversity in general has been really, really helpful.
Yeah.
You know, that if I can work on things like, you know, stress and anxiety that are caused by, you know, by other things.
Right.
You know, the kind of the whole thing of just trying to get my nervous system a little more regulated. One thing I I found that's been helpful, at least, you know, specifically for the tick, but just really
for you,
taking my nervous system down a notch.
Yeah.
Is that RRP program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not like you got a little plug there.
I did get a little plug there, but I wasn't expecting. But yeah, right. So because that's all about the nervous system, and so I do talk a lot about that with neurodiversity because so much of it has to do with just how our nervous system is designed, right? So maybe there's a predisposition, and maybe it's trauma, maybe it's whatever. Usually it's some combination, right? It's some predisposition to a neurological difference, a variant, because we don't even say it needs to be fixed. It's a variant that we need to understand. It's a natural variant in human processing, right? And then you add some trauma, you add some different things, and then this starts to show up, right? And the brain is just trying to compensate for the energy, the pathways. And so when we can start to lower that, stay out of that sympathetic, not go into a dorsal shutdown, right? We're not going to live in ventral all the time because no one does, right? That's not realistic.
Right.
So where are we at in that sympathetic system? And if we can lower the anxiety and keep the nervous system at a regulated state, you're very active, so you move a lot. That's also very good. There's a lot of things that you do. The RRP and the SSP and RRP are really very helpful in creating safety within the nervous system, so the nervous system doesn't feel so much anxiety. It isn't looking so desperately for safety, and that can lower it. So I'm glad that's been helpful. I appreciate the plug. That wasn't I appreciate it.
No.
So did this show up like when you were in school, when you were younger and you were in school? Did this, you said, you know, family would notice it or whatever, but did it make you self-conscious, or did you isolate or avoid social situations in school?
It showed up mainly in a couple of year period as a kid, and there were all sorts of other things going on during that time frame as well that like led to some. So I think that there were times people would notice it, you know, but it was, I was able to keep it more under control.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah. Were you active in sports back then?
Yeah, I played a lot of sports and things like that, and so I was able to, you know, just kind of, you know, I think people thought it was just like an occasional twitch I had or something.
Right.
It really wasn't that bad. Plus, I was able to make kind of a geographical change between like middle school and high school, so I kind of got a fresh start someplace.
Yeah, for sure.
Which you know, it has its good points and bad points.
It does.
You know,
it does. And I think an important thing that you said is there were things going on in your life when this showed up, because we usually see it showing up between 5 and 10. Right. And I'm not saying it can't show up without outside stressors, because it can, because there is a genetic component. However, it's one of those things that tends to, does it get turned on by trauma? I think that's where a lot of the research is today. And we don't have a tremendous amount of research on Tourette's. We don't know cause. We know it's neurological. We know it's a genetic component. But like neurodiversity in general, we're seeing more and more of this. And we're diagnosing it differently. I think that's what we would say, right? Is that we're diagnosing this umbrella of things that kind of, there's a lot of overlap about how they tend to show up, but they're all really related to the nervous system.
You know, and I do think there's a genetic thing, because I've noticed I've got some two daughters that are in their mid 20s, and I've noticed both of them have a little bit of it. Like, I'm going to say like 1% of what I've got, but I've noticed kind of a predisposition to occasionally get a little nervous thing going on.
Okay. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I think scientists would say, is that conditioning or is that genetic? And I'm going to say to you that both matter. Right. If they have a genetic predisposition, right, and then they have an example of someone who is doing that, both things can be true. Right. And everybody has stressors.
Right.
I don't care who you are. I don't care how perfect your life has been. Everybody has stressors. And if that's how our nervous system is managing that and we're not talking about other things, then they definitely can show up, especially with the genetic predisposition. Sorry, Harley's being, he heard noises in the building.
He's a good boy.
He is a good boy. I'm a little loud right now. So I think that some of the things that I would want to ask are, what advice would you give to others, and what would you want others to know about Tourette's, or about you, or about the journey?
I think it's I think sometimes, regardless of what they call it, just knowing that it's something.
Yeah.
Meaning, okay, this is just a neurological thing.
Right.
Is it curable? No. Can you make it better? Yes. Is that you don't? I guess the biggest thing is you don't have to be ashamed of it.
Okay, I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I wish that someone along the way would have told me a long time ago, this is not something you need to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
And because it's just, I don't know, shame can keep you from seeking help.
That's right. Yeah.
Because you're going to think I'm crazy. You're going to think
right.
it can really just
And it didn't impact you in getting to relationships, but it can impact people. They can start to isolate because they do feel a lot of shame. So then they don't go out. They're very self-conscious, which in and of itself can make it worse.
Yeah.
Right? So then the tics can show up even more. So there is this relevancy to how shame impacts Tourette's in and of itself. Right? So I think that's a very good point about the shame. I think people don't talk about it enough. And I get frustrated when I hear people getting diagnosed from someone and they don't talk about the things, right? They don't talk about, even if someone gets diabetes, they go, hey, eat these things, don't eat these things, see you later, right? And you're like, what do I do with this, right? Same thing with mental health stuff, right? Or neurological stuff. And people think that this is often they'll say neurodivergency is a mental health issue. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually a neurological processing difference that can lead to mental health issues if we don't treat it appropriately, right? Talking about the shame, doing the things. And you had some interventions along the way that were not for Tourette's, but probably made a difference, like your AA program, right? So these different things probably helped you in other ways that were just the side effect, right, of that weren't directly related to the Tourette's, but overall helped you.
Yeah, it and I think it just in general, the idea of like neurodivergency just having a stigma is that you start to realize that neurodivergency's been around forever. And some of the of the most impactful people in history made their impact because they were neurodivergent. That's right. I actually saw like an interview the other day with this guy I think his name's Alexander Karp. He's the CEO of Palantir, which is this kind of defense AI company.
Okay.
And he basically said, hey, in the future, the neurodivergent people are going to be responsible for everything that improves life.
I mean, there are companies that hire specifically to neurodiversity because when they know something and they're interested in something, they're going to know everything, right? They're going to focus on that. They're going to do the thing. And there's a lot of benefits. I always call them the superpowers, right? That come with neurodiversity. There is that. Yes. Right? And yet we talk about the things that are a little more challenging, and we tend to laugh at people or make fun of people behind their backs and say, oh, yeah, but really, the way that they process the world, like not liking small talk, things like that, I mean, there's something to that, right? They're more serious. And so, yes, they are developing great things. They are hyper-focused sometimes on stuff, but there's great things that come from neurodivergency, for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming and sharing.
You bet.
All right. Thanks.